What would you do if, in the middle of a blizzard outside Billings, Montana, a voice you couldn't see led you to something crying in the snow, and that sound turned out to be a newborn baby? This is the story of the baby in the snow, a true miracle that happened on a frozen February night in 2019, when a nurse named Emily Carter stopped her car on an empty Montana highway and found a child minutes from death. But what she saw before she found that baby still leaves people wondering if she was guided by an angel or by something even greater. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I'd love to see how far stories of faith and miracles are reaching tonight, because what happens next will stay with you long after the snow melts. February 2019 came with warnings all across northern Michigan. Weather alerts flashing red on every phone screen. The forecast called it a once-in-a-decade blizzard, and the sky seemed ready to prove it. By 5 in the evening, snow was already falling thick as feathers, and wind gusts pushed hard enough to rattle windows even inside the hospital. Emily Carter, 38, zipped her jacket as she left St. Mary's Regional, her breath turning to mist before it disappeared into the storm. She had been on her feet for nearly 13 hours, checking IV lines, adjusting heart monitors, and whispering comfort to new mothers too exhausted to speak. Her job in the neonatal unit was demanding, but she carried it like a calling. She always had. Tonight, though, the work had left her quieter than usual. The air outside bit through her gloves as she walked to her car. She moved quickly, her boots crunching through the buildup of snow. The hospital parking lot looked ghostly, cars buried halfway up the tires, lampposts casting cones of light that blurred in the wind. When she started the engine, the dashboard clock blinked 11:47 p.m. The roads were already empty. Police alerts had gone out an hour earlier, urging people to stay home. But for hospital staff, that kind of warning was background noise. She drove carefully, tires gripping the icy surface, wipers sweeping snow that fell faster than they could clear it. Her headlights made short tunnels of visibility, the world reduced to a shifting curtain of white. It had been a hard few weeks. She had watched a healthy baby die of pneumonia. She had attended another coworker's baby shower, smiling politely as pastel balloons filled the break room. The ache of not being able to conceive, of being the nurse who held everyone else's child but her own, felt heavier in winter. On her way out of the hospital that night, one of the nurses had said, half joking, "Careful on the roads, Em. Pray a little extra." She had smiled back, saying, "Always do," and she meant it. Prayer was second nature to her. Quiet, simple, unplanned. A few miles into the drive, she reached for the radio, hoping for a weather update, but all she got was static. She shut it off and listened instead to the sound of the wind and the hum of the heater. The smell of antiseptic still lingered faintly on her hands. Then something strange happened. The dashboard lights flickered, just once, but enough to make her glance down. The car didn't stall, but for a moment, it felt as though the world outside had paused. Through the windshield, she thought she saw a faint light ahead. Not the harsh glare of headlights, but something softer. She leaned forward, squinting, but the wind swept another sheet of snow across the glass, and it was gone. She told herself it was a reflection, maybe a porch lamp or a snowplow turning in the distance. Still, her pulse quickened. If she had known what that light really was, she would have slowed down right there, because that was the first sign. The storm thickened. Drifts covered the yellow road lines, and the GPS lost its signal. The tires made deep ruts in the untouched snow, the only tracks for miles. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, leaning forward as if that would help her see farther. Every instinct said to focus on the road, but part of her couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. not threatening, more like waiting. Halfway between Traverse City and home, she passed a toppled green road sign. The only word still visible under the frost was Grace. She read it aloud, softly, like a name she hadn't spoken before. The wind pushed against the car so hard it groaned. Then she saw something again, a shape in the snow just beyond the headlight beam. At first, she thought it was a deer, but it was standing too still, too upright. The outline looked human. A faint glow surrounded it, gold and steady, the kind of light that doesn't belong in a storm. Her breath caught. She blinked hard, once, twice. The figure didn't move. Then the gust came again, and it vanished behind the swirl of white. She sat frozen, one hand hovering over the gear shift. The heater hummed loud. She could feel her heart beating in her throat. You think you know where this is going. A trick of the eyes, a tired mind. But what she was about to see next would take away every doubt she had about what's real and what isn't. The drive continued. Another few miles. Her headlights caught the reflection of a mailbox, the snow banked halfway up its post. Her phone vibrated in the cup holder, an emergency alert. Blizzard warning, whiteout conditions, avoid travel. She laughed dryly, whispering, a little late for that. When she reached the long rural stretch between town and her neighborhood, visibility dropped to almost nothing. She slowed to 10 miles an hour, her eyes fixed on the two faint ruts her tires carved ahead. The wipers squeaked against ice. The world outside had turned into sound, the hollow roar of wind and the engine's muffled whine. Then the light came back, not ahead this time, to her left, down a narrow service road buried under snow. It flickered once, then twice, like someone waving a lantern. Her pulse jumped. She turned her head, trying to make out the shape, but the snow blurred everything beyond a few feet. Probably just a truck, she said aloud, though her voice trembled. Still, she slowed. Her instincts were louder now. Something in her gut whispered, "Stop." She pressed the brake lightly. The tires hissed against the ice. She lowered her window a crack, and a rush of cold air filled the car. The wind carried a sound she couldn't place, faint, rhythmic, distant. It wasn't the creak of trees or the scrape of branches. It was softer, like something alive. A shiver ran through her. She rolled the window back up. "I'm overtired," she murmured. "That's all." But she couldn't drive away. She checked the rearview mirror. No lights behind her, no one coming, just darkness and snow. Her eyes drifted again to the side mirror, and for half a second she swore she saw it. The same luminous figure, standing at the edge of the woods, one arm lifted, pointing down the road ahead. She gasped, clutching the steering wheel, her breath fogging the glass. And this is where everything she believed about safety, timing, and even faith itself was about to be tested. She blinked again, and the shape was gone. Nothing but white. The engine hummed low. She sat there for nearly a minute, debating whether to keep driving or turn around. Then the car shuddered slightly, not from wind, but from inside her. Something inside her chest said, "Keep going, you're not done yet." She pressed the accelerator lightly. The car crept forward. The figure didn't return, but she could still feel its presence. The snow around the headlights seemed to glow faintly brighter. At home, a neighbor would later tell her that the power had gone out across the entire block right around that time. Streetlights, porch lights, all gone. But Emily's car headlights never dimmed. The road bent sharply downhill, and through the curtain of snow, she saw faint traces of red taillights buried in drifts, abandoned cars from earlier accidents. She slowed again, maneuvering carefully between them. Her hands were slick with sweat inside her gloves. Another gust hit. The snow rose in swirling columns, like waves crashing against invisible walls. She squinted through it, barely seeing the turnoff that led toward her neighborhood. And that's when it happened. A soft sound through the storm, barely audible, almost swallowed by the wind. She didn't recognize it yet, but it would haunt her later. A distant, muffled cry. She turned her head, but the snow erased direction. The sound came again, faint, human, small. She gripped the wheel harder and whispered, "Lord, please, whatever this is, show me what to do." The next few miles felt endless. Her windshield fogged, her heart raced, but she never stopped glancing into the dark edges of the storm, waiting to see that glow again. Because somewhere out there, buried in the snow, something was waiting for her. Something that would make her believe in miracles again. And when the cry returned, clearer this time, she realized it wasn't the wind. It was a baby. The sound came again, faint but unmistakable now. Emily turned down the heater so she could hear better. For a few seconds there was only wind and static from the dashboard, then that same fragile cry cut through the storm. She hit the brakes, the tires sliding slightly on the ice, and stared through the windshield into the wall of white ahead. There was nothing visible, just snow whipping in all directions. Her chest tightened. No one in their right mind would be out here at midnight in this weather. She rolled down the window, wincing as cold air hit her face. The sound was closer now, uneven, like a baby's cry fading in and out with the wind. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Then she put the car in park, grabbed her flashlight from the glove box, and stepped outside. The world was noise, wind howling, snow hitting her coat like sand. She pulled her scarf over her mouth and started walking toward the sound. The flashlight beam cut a small tunnel through the darkness, barely enough to see. Her boots sank deep into the snow, every step a struggle. She swept the light left, then right, searching for any shape that didn't belong. The crying came again, sharper this time, and she turned toward it, heart hammering. She stopped near the ditch beside the road. The beam flickered over something small, a towel or blanket half buried in the drift. Her knees hit the snow before she even realized she'd fallen. She brushed the snow away with her bare hands, her breath catching when she saw a tiny, motionless arm. "Oh my God," she whispered, digging faster, pulling free a newborn wrapped in a soaked towel. The child's skin was bluish, the lips trembling but still breathing. Her training took over. She stripped off her coat, wrapped it around the baby, and pressed it against her chest. The air burned her throat when she shouted, "It's okay, I've got you, I've got you," as if the baby could understand. She turned back toward the road, half running, half stumbling through the snow. Her legs were shaking by the time she reached the car. She threw open the door, climbed in, slammed it shut, and cranked the heater to full blast. The baby's body was cold against her chest. She tore off one glove, checked for a pulse, faint, but there. She rubbed the tiny hands gently, speaking without realizing she was praying. "Please, Lord, please keep her alive. Just breathe, please." Her tears froze on her lashes. She started the engine and pulled back onto the road, driving one-handed, the other arm cradling the bundle under her coat. She had no phone signal yet. The nearest clinic was 20 miles north. The snow blurred everything, headlights catching only the next few feet. Every bump made her wince. The baby whimpered once, then went quiet again, and she felt panic rise in her chest. She pressed the accelerator harder. After a few miles, a bar of faint signal appeared on her phone. She hit 911, shouting into the speaker, giving her location as best she could. The operator's voice was calm but firm, telling her to head for St. Luke's urgent care. "Paramedics are on standby. Keep the baby warm." "I'm trying," she said, voice breaking. She's freezing. The operator kept her talking, asking questions she could barely answer. Where had she found the baby? Was anyone else there? Emily said no. No tracks, no lights, no sign of anyone. Just that sound in the snow. She almost mentioned the glowing figure she'd seen earlier, but stopped herself. It didn't matter now. All that mattered was keeping the baby alive. The road began to slope downward toward town. Through the blur of snow, she caught glimpses of familiar signs. Gas stations dark under the power outage, plows parked in lots. She kept whispering prayers under her breath, half to the child, half to herself. "You're going to make it, sweetheart. You're safe now. Just a little longer." When the lights of the clinic finally appeared, her whole body started shaking. She swerved into the parking lot and leaned on the horn until two figures in coats ran out. One of them pulled open the passenger door and froze when he saw what she was holding. "It's a baby," she gasped. "Found her in the snow." They rushed her inside. The air smelled of disinfectant and coffee. Nurses took the child from her arms, wrapping her in warm blankets, checking vitals, moving fast and quiet. Emily stood against the wall, unable to move. Her arms felt empty and burning. She watched as they worked over the small body, tiny wires and monitors lighting up, the sound of a weak heartbeat filling the room. A doctor turned to her, eyes wide. "If you hadn't found her right when you did, she wouldn't have made it another 10 minutes. She nodded numbly. The nurse touched her arm. "Sit down, ma'am. You're shaking." Emily sank into a chair, still wearing her soaked clothes. The adrenaline drained out of her, replaced by disbelief. She tried to replay the moment, the light, the cry, the towel buried in snow. She looked down at her hands. They were red and raw from the cold. The police arrived soon after. They asked the same questions over and over. Where exactly did she find the baby? Did she see anyone nearby? Could she have mistaken an animal for the cry? She answered as best she could, her voice trembling. "I heard her. She was crying. I didn't imagine it." They sent a deputy to the site that night. When he came back, he looked uneasy. "No footprints except yours," he said quietly. "No tire marks, no trail, just nothing." Emily barely slept the next 2 nights. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the towel in the snow and that faint golden light motioning her forward. She couldn't explain it, but she knew she hadn't dreamed it. 2 days later, the local paper ran the headline, "Nurse finds newborn in blizzard. Doctors call it a miracle." Her co-workers at the hospital hugged her. Some cried. The chief of staff said he wanted to nominate her for a community service award. She smiled, but inside she felt strange, as if the real story hadn't happened to her but to someone standing nearby. When she finally saw the baby again, now stable in a small incubator at St. Mary's, something in her heart settled. The infant was awake, her tiny eyes blinking under the warm light. A nurse said softly, "She's a fighter." Emily leaned close to the glass and whispered, "So am I." That night, as she left the hospital, the storm had cleared. The sky was cloudless, the air sharp. She looked toward the tree line beyond the parking lot, the same direction she'd seen the figure that night. For just a second, the light above the snow reflected faintly, almost like a shimmer. She stood there, motionless, until it faded. Then she whispered, "Thank you," and walked to her car. No one ever found who abandoned the baby or how she ended up there. Investigators called it a mystery, something beyond reason. Emily called it something else, an answer. And though she never saw the figure again, she would remember that faint glow for the rest of her life. A warmth that came from nowhere on the coldest night of her years. The storm broke 2 days after the rescue, leaving the world quiet in that way only fresh snow can manage. For the first time in weeks, the hospital parking lot shone under a pale blue sky. Emily parked in her usual spot and sat still for a moment before going inside, staring at the frozen world outside her windshield. The air looked clean, scrubbed of the chaos that had nearly swallowed her. Yet, part of her still felt as though she hadn't escaped it, not really. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the cry again, faint, lost, and then suddenly in her arms. Inside, the hospital smelled of antiseptic and floor polish. Someone had left a styrofoam cup of cocoa on the counter with a sticky note that said, "To the Snow Angel." She smiled and shook her head, embarrassed. That nickname had started the morning after the story hit the local paper. The photo of her in her heavy parka, face red from the cold, holding the tiny bundled infant, was already on half the news sites in the county. Her co-workers cheered her when she walked in, some hugging her tight, others teasing her about going viral. She thanked them, but when the laughter faded and the normal sounds of monitors returned, she made her way to the pediatric ward. The hallway felt longer than usual. At the end of it, through the glass, she saw the incubator, the small, clear box surrounded by quiet beeps. Inside lay the baby, alive, breathing. The bruised purple of her skin had faded, replaced by a soft, pink flush. Her tiny chest rose and fell with steadier rhythm. "Morning, Emily," said one of the pediatric nurses, flipping through a chart. "You're here early." "Couldn't stay away." The nurse smiled. "She's a miracle, all right. Stable temp, strong heartbeat. No sign of frostbite. We've started calling her Baby Grace." "Grace," Emily repeated, the word settling over her like a blanket. She remembered that broken road sign that had glowed through the storm. Grace Road. Maybe it had been more than coincidence. When the nurse left, Emily sat near the window and just watched. The machines hummed. The snow outside gleamed like powdered glass, and the baby's tiny fingers twitched against the blanket. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt peace. But outside that small circle of calm, the world was already moving. Detectives had opened a formal investigation. A dozen volunteers had combed the stretch of highway where the baby was found. They found nothing. No footprints beyond Emily's. No tire tracks leading away. No signs of anyone stopping there. The area was too remote for cameras. A senior officer told reporters, "If this nurse hadn't stopped exactly when she did, we'd be dealing with a recovery, not a rescue." At night, Emily followed the updates online. News outlets called it the miracle on County Road 12. The comments filled with prayers, disbelief, and debate. Some insisted she must have heard the baby from a passing car. Others argued she had hallucinated in the whiteout. But one thread, from a woman named Lillian in Wisconsin, caught her attention. It read, "When you see light in a storm, it's not the weather. Sometimes he shows up like that. Happened to my brother in Iraq." Emily read the comment twice, then closed her laptop. She hadn't told anyone about the figure in the storm. She wasn't ready. The thought of explaining it to a detective or a journalist made her uneasy, but she couldn't deny what she'd seen. That calm, bright shape, standing where no one could have stood, pointing exactly to where that cry came from. She returned to the hospital every day after her shifts ended, often long after visiting hours. The nurses stopped trying to remind her of policy. They'd find her sitting in the corner chair by the incubator, talking softly through the glass. Sometimes she read from a children's book, her voice steady and warm. Other times, she simply watched in silence, tracing the outline of the tiny face through the reflection. Weeks passed, and the investigation slowly faded from headlines. No one claimed the child. The local church took up a small collection for her, placing a basket by the altar marked for the little one found in the snow. Parishioners dropped in coins and folded bills, whispering prayers. Emily had never been particularly devout. She prayed, yes, but in private ways without ceremony. Yet now she found herself lighting candles before work, standing in the back pew with her hands clasped. She didn't ask for answers. She only said thank you. One morning, she walked into the pediatric ward and found the bed empty. Panic shot through her until a nurse appeared behind her with a smile. "Don't worry, they moved her to observation. She's doing great." Emily followed, heart still pounding. And there she was, Grace, sleeping peacefully, a tiny blue bracelet on her wrist. The tag read, "Unknown infant, found February 14th, Valentine's Day." Emily let out a quiet laugh that turned into tears. "You picked the right day to live, didn't you?" A doctor approached, checking his chart. "We'll keep her another week for monitoring. After that, child services will take over." Emily nodded but didn't answer. The words hit harder than she expected. She had saved lives before, babies, patients, strangers. But this felt different. It didn't feel like a rescue. It felt like she'd been chosen to stand at that exact place, at that exact moment. That night, she sat in her kitchen with the adoption website open on her laptop, scrolling through requirements, legal steps, background checks. She closed it halfway through and leaned back, whispering, "Lord, if this is what you want, I'll know. Show me." The next day, she got her sign. As she was leaving the hospital, a janitor, a quiet man she'd worked alongside for years, stopped her in the hallway. He handed her something small wrapped in tissue paper. "Someone left this at the chapel door this morning," he said. "No name on it. Thought maybe you'd know what to do with it." She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a tiny silver cross on a chain, no bigger than a thumbprint. It was old, tarnished, and warm from being held. She turned it over, and on the back, faintly scratched, was one word: trust. She stared at it for a long time before slipping it into her pocket. When she walked into the ward that evening, the baby's eyes opened for the first time as if on cue. Bright, steady, unblinking. Emily felt her throat tighten. "You've got a lot of people watching over you, don't you?" she whispered. In the coming weeks, the official search closed. Child Welfare announced that if no relatives appeared within 60 days, the infant would be eligible for adoption. The nurses teased Emily gently. "We all know where that paperwork's going." She laughed, pretending to brush it off, but the truth had already settled inside her. She started buying small things: a blanket with tiny embroidered stars, a second-hand crib from Facebook Marketplace, a set of pale blue curtains. Every item felt like an act of faith, like speaking a promise aloud. The 60th day came with an early thaw. The snow had melted into muddy roads and shining ditches. Emily drove to the courthouse alone, her hands shaking as she filled out the adoption forms. When the clerk handed them back, stamped and official, she exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. That evening, she returned to the hospital. The staff gathered quietly around her as the social worker handed her a folder. "It's done," the woman said gently. "Congratulations, Miss Carter, she's all yours." Emily stepped forward, tears blurring her vision, and took Grace into her arms. The baby yawned, stretching her tiny fingers against Emily's neck. For a moment, the world disappeared. No beeping monitors, no whispers, just the weight of a child who wasn't supposed to be alive, breathing softly in her arms. Outside, the last light of day reflected off the melting snow, sending golden ripples across the windows. Emily looked up and whispered the same words she had spoken that night in the storm. "Thank you." No one saw it but her. A brief flash of light outside the glass. small and warm, like a flicker caught between clouds. It was gone in a second, but she didn't need proof anymore. She had her sign. Spring came late that year, slow, reluctant, as if winter didn't want to let go. By March, the snow had turned gray at the edges, crusted with salt from the plows. Puddles gathered along the sidewalks outside Emily's small townhouse, reflecting the bright blue of the sky that hadn't been visible for months. Inside, the house smelled faintly of baby lotion and clean laundry. Grace slept in a small bassinet beside the window, her breath steady, her hands curled around the blanket edge. Emily moved quietly through the room, afraid even her footsteps might disturb her. There was still a part of her that couldn't believe this was real, that the baby whose skin she once warmed against her chest in a blizzard now lay sleeping under her roof, safe, fed, and alive. It had been 4 months since that night. 4 months since the sound in the snow, since the glow she never told anyone about, since the moment everything she believed about her own life had changed. The adoption had gone smoothly, faster than she expected. The judge called it providential timing. Everyone at the courthouse had smiled when they heard her story. The same local station that covered the rescue ran a short segment titled From Blizzard to Blessing. But fame faded quickly. By April, new tragedies filled the news cycle: floods, politics, another storm somewhere else. The world moved on. Emily didn't. She filled her days with work and with Grace. Diaper changes, bottles at 3 in the morning, the quiet rhythm of ordinary motherhood that felt like grace in itself. The nights were hardest. Sometimes, as she rocked the baby to sleep, she caught herself glancing toward the window, half expecting to see that glow again, that gentle, human-shaped light between the trees. She never did, but the memory stayed close, like a shadow of warmth behind her ribs. In early May, she returned to the spot where she had found Grace. The snow was gone, replaced by damp soil and wild grass. The ditch was shallow now, filled with rainwater. She parked on the shoulder and stood there for a long time, arms crossed against the chill. Birds sang somewhere in the distance. There was no trace of what had happened. No towel, no signpost, nothing to mark the place. She picked up a small flat stone and placed it near the edge of the ditch. Then she whispered, "Thank you," and walked back to her car. That week, she started keeping a journal. Not a diary, exactly, more like a record of moments. She wrote about the day Grace smiled for the first time, about the way her fingers wrapped around Emily's thumb, about the mornings when she woke up crying and stopped the moment Emily said her name. Every entry ended with the same line: "I still don't know why you chose me, but I'm trying to be worthy of it." Her coworkers noticed the change in her. She smiled more easily, spoke softer, moved slower. One of the nurses said, "You look lighter, Emily." She just nodded. But one evening in June, something happened that brought the memory rushing back. She had just finished feeding Grace and laid her in the crib when the power went out. A summer thunderstorm rolled in, sudden and loud, rain beating against the windows. The room filled with the deep blue light of lightning. Emily reached for her phone, using the screen as a flashlight, checking the outlets, then the breaker. Nothing. She turned toward the window and froze. Beyond the glass, through the streaks of rain, the backyard glowed faintly. Not lightning. Softer, steadier. It pulsed once, then twice, like something breathing. She stepped closer, her hand pressed against the pane. For a moment, she thought it might be a reflection from the streetlight, but the power was out on the whole block. The glow hovered near the fence line, illuminating the wet grass. And just before it faded, she saw the faint outline of a figure. Tall, still, the same calm shape she'd seen in the storm. Her breath hitched. The light vanished as quickly as it appeared. The rain kept falling, loud and rhythmic. She stayed there for a full minute, heart pounding, before whispering, "I see you." When the power came back half an hour later, she sat down beside Grace's crib, trembling and smiling at once. "You really haven't left us, have you?" She didn't tell anyone. Not this time. It wasn't a story meant for headlines or hospitals. It was hers alone. A reminder that what had begun in a storm hadn't ended there. In the following weeks, small coincidences began to happen. The neighbor who had lost her job found a new one after Emily prayed with her. A patient's baby in the neonatal ward, one doctors feared wouldn't survive, made a full recovery after Emily sat by the incubator one night and quietly whispered the same prayer she had said in the blizzard. Word spread quietly around the hospital. "If Nurse Carter prays for your baby, they get better." She laughed it off when she heard it, but deep down, she wondered. By late summer, Grace was sitting up, clapping her hands whenever Emily sang. Her eyes, blue-gray like a winter morning, followed everything with curious calm. Sometimes, when the afternoon sun came through the window, they seemed to glow faintly. Emily noticed it once while rocking her to sleep and whispered, "You're full of light, aren't you?" The years ahead weren't without hardship. There were hospital bills, nights without sleep, moments of fear when Grace caught a fever. But through every moment, that sense of unseen protection never left. The world could be chaos outside her walls, but inside, it always felt like the air after rain. On the one-year anniversary of the rescue, Emily took Grace back to the spot on County Road 12. The grass was high now, bending in the wind. She held her daughter close and said, "This is where you started, sweetheart. Right here." A breeze lifted the ends of her hair. For just a heartbeat, the sunlight seemed to break through the clouds in a perfect circle, spilling gold across the ditch. Emily smiled, closed her eyes, and whispered again, "Thank you." Later that night, she uploaded a small post to her social media. Nothing dramatic, just a single photo of her holding Grace in the sunlight. The caption read, "A year ago today, I found a baby in the snow. Now I get to tuck her in every night. Miracles don't always end, sometimes they just grow." The post spread slowly, shared by mothers, pastors, nurses, strangers. A few weeks later, she received a message from a woman in Tennessee who had lost her own child years earlier. It said, "Your story reminded me to believe again. Thank you." Emily read the message twice, then looked toward the window where the reflection of the crib light glowed softly against the glass. Outside, the night was quiet. The world was calm. She didn't need another sign anymore. The miracle wasn't in the fire or the storm. It was asleep in the next room, breathing peacefully, her small hand reaching up in dreams. And in that silence, Emily finally understood what the voice in the wind had meant all along, that she hadn't been alone that night, and she never would be again. The night outside her window was calm, the kind of stillness that feels like a held breath. Inside, a single lamp glowed beside the crib where Grace slept, her tiny hand curled over the blanket. Emily stood watching, her heart full of quiet gratitude. She touched the small cross around her neck and whispered, "Thank you for finding us, for letting me be her mother." The miracle, she knew now, wasn't only in the storm or the light, it was in what came after. In faith that stayed, in peace that grew, in a life rebuilt from mercy. Sometimes God doesn't wait for us to be ready. He meets us right where we are, even in the cold, even in the dark, and shows us that what looks like the end might only be the beginning. So before we close tonight, let's take a moment to pray together. Maybe you're facing your own storm right now. Maybe you're still waiting for your own sign. This prayer is for you. Lord Jesus, we thank you for finding us in the places where hope seems buried. We thank you for every unseen miracle, for every cry you've answered in the night. Tonight, I ask you to bless everyone listening, those who are waiting for healing, those who are afraid, those who feel forgotten. Remind us, Lord, that you still walk beside us, even when we cannot see you through the storm. Teach us to trust, even when the road is dark. And let every heart tonight feel what Emily felt when she saw that light, the certainty that we are not alone. We ask this in your holy name. Amen. If this story touched your heart tonight, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that miracles still happen in ordinary lives. If you've ever felt lost and then found your way again, tell us in the comments. Your story might be the sign someone else is praying for. And if you believe that God still moves in quiet, gentle ways, through storms, through strangers, through small cries in the night, press the like button, because it helps this story reach another soul who needs to believe again. And finally, if you want to hear more stories like this, true stories of mercy, hope, and the power of prayer, subscribe and stay with us. The next story might be the one that speaks straight to your heart. God bless you. Thank you for watching.